Despite having few memorable on-screen roles, stage and screen actress Tallulah Bankhead has gone down in history as one of the most notable female figures in entertainment. This is due as much to the actress's great success in the field as it is to her promiscuous and progressive attitudes towards sex and libation. Join FactsVerse as we explore Tallulah Bankhead's life filled with affairs and drugs. Tallulah Bankhead was born January 31, 1902. She was born in Huntsville, Alabama, and came from a family with prominent political ties. Her grandfather was a U.S. Senator for Alabama, and so was her uncle. Later, Tallulah's father would serve as both a U.S. Representative and Speaker of the House. Tallulah's mother and father were Ada and William Bankhead. Tallulah was their second child, with their first child being Eugenia, born 1901. Tragically, Ada passed away only 3 weeks after Tallulah's birth. The cause of death was blood poisoning, and William was devastated. Given that William was busy practicing law, he sent Eugenia and Tallulah to live with his parents in Jasper, Alabama. The two girls also spent a lot of time staying over at their aunt's home in Montgomery. Eugenia was always the more attractive of the two, which caused Tallulah to have to seek attention in other ways. Thankfully, the bright and energetic young girl was quite capable of finding ways, besides her looks, to garner attention from those around her. Tallulah and Eugenia were sent to a convent by their grandmother when they were young. Their grandmother believed that doing so was necessary to teach the girls proper manners. The girls were enrolled in the Convent of the Sacred Heart in 1912. This school was located in Manhattanville, New York, and attending it proved a massive change for the two sisters. Despite their initial resistance to the program, Tallulah and Eugenia's grandmother was astonished when the two girls began acting like proper young ladies. Around the same time, William was gaining attention with his political career, and his success allowed the girls to stay in prestigious schools throughout the rest of their education. Though Tallulah had never been the most attractive young girl, this changed as she went through puberty. By 15, she was just as attractive as her sister. However, she had a much more restless spirit. While 16-year-old Eugenia was making plans to get married, Tallulah submitted a picture of herself to the magazine Picture Play after they put on a contest to find an unknown actress to play a bit part in a film in New York. Tallulah's picture stood out, but the young woman had forgotten to include her name and address. Thankfully, the magazine printed her picture in the next issue with the caption, "Who is she?" Tallulah subsequently used her father's connections to get in touch with the magazine, and the rest is history. William was initially hesitant to allow Tallulah to venture off to New York, but was willing to compromise if Tallulah brought her aunt along as a chaperone. Tallulah's wealthy grandfather agreed to pay for the trip, which wound up lasting a great deal longer than expected. Tallulah was paid only $75 for the bit part, though it required 3 weeks of work for the young actress. As well, she was barely in it. The film was the 1918 silent feature Who Loved Him Best, and would likely not be remembered if not for the fact that it was Tallulah's screen debut. After filming, she and her aunt decided to stay in New York. Tallulah had caught the acting bug, and she was interested in finding bigger and better roles. They settled into the Algonquin Hotel, where Tallulah gradually began to fit in with the cultural elite of New York. While she was making a name for herself in the New York social scene, her father was able to use some of his connections to secure her a role on stage. This was in the 1918 theater production The Squab Farm. Tallulah decided she liked acting on stage more than in front of the camera, and set her sights on a career in theater. When she turned 18, she no longer needed to be chaperoned by her aunt. She had already become fairly immersed in the New York party scene, and her new freedom allowed her to venture even deeper. Though she had made a promise to her father to never touch alcohol, she had never promised him not to touch marijuana and cocaine. Tallulah experimented for several years in the New York party scene, all the while finding only middling success on stage. Eventually, she grew desperate and decided to seek out the aid of a psychic, who told her that her future success lied overseas. By seeming coincidence, Tallulah was subsequently offered a role on stage in London. Believing it to be a sign, she took the job. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. As it turns out, the psychic who told Tallulah Bankhead that her future success lied overseas was right. The play that brought her to London was The Dancers, and both Tallulah and the play became a major hit. Tallulah's unprecedented success in The Dancers opened up several doors and led to an 8-year-long London period that saw her performing in hit after hit. She loved the fame and was grateful to her audiences. She wasn't above befriending her fans and even invited some of them over to her house for dinner and sex. You see, in addition to a taste for mind-altering substances, Tallulah had also grown to have a bit of an insatiable appetite for sex. For the time, this kind of attitude was considered fairly unbecoming of a woman. But Tallulah was so into sex, she simply couldn't be bothered to care. She preferred her sex impersonal and claimed that performing in the missionary position made her feel claustrophobic. She dabbled in countless affairs with seemingly anyone who asked, considering sexual forwardness to be a favorable old-fashioned value in a man. By the end of the 20s, Tallulah had essentially become an honorary icon in England for her work on the London stage. But this recognition on the stage didn't quite lead to riches that were capable of sustaining her increasingly ludicrous spending habits. In 1930, Tallulah was invited back overseas by Paramount Studios with the offer of a lucrative film deal. Wanting the money, she took the offer. However, she's since claimed the real reason she came back to America was to have sex with Gary Cooper, which she eventually did. She reluctantly bid farewell to her London life and set sail back to New York in 1931. Though Paramount Studios was based out of California, they had offices in New York that allowed Tallulah to stay there for the time being. Her first film in America was 1931's Tarnished Lady. She had not been impressed with her experience filming, and audiences were not impressed with the result. She didn't have the patience for cinema and preferred the spontaneity and fast-paced nature of the theatrical performance. She headed from New York to California and performed in several more films with dwindling success. She got negative attention from her largely conservative fellows in Hollywood with frank talk about sex and reminisced about London. After 1932's Faithless, Tallulah decided to call it quits with Paramount. She headed back to New York with the intention of going back to the stage, but became diagnosed with a life-threatening case of gonorrhea soon after her arrival. This caused her to have to undergo an emergency hysterectomy, resulting in a several-month period of recovery. Eventually, she ventured back to London, believing New York had brought her bad luck. Sadly, London didn't seem to bring Tallulah much better luck. She was given a role in the play Dark Victory, but that play bombed. Subsequently, she performed in a number of productions that were all minor failures. Simultaneously, she was sinking deeper and deeper into substance abuse due to the pain she experienced from her hysterectomy. And she had long since given up on the promise to her father to stay away from alcohol. She spent most of her days mixing pills and booze, something doctors don't recommend. Tallulah eventually came back to Hollywood, unsuccessfully campaigning for the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Even with her father's increasingly powerful political connections, Tallulah couldn't get the role. But she did achieve her greatest success ever on the screen several years later in Hitchcock's classic 1944 thriller Lifeboat. In 1937, she married her first and only husband, fellow stage actor John Emery. Most speculated that the marriage was done to benefit the public image of Tallulah's father, who was gaining political traction and desperately wanted his daughter to straighten up. Regardless, Tallulah and John divorced only 4 years later. She never married again. As she got older, she became more and more intent on living a crazy lifestyle. She got a breast augmentation and loved to flaunt her aging body and sexuality. She also never turned her back on her true partner, mind-altering substances. In December of 1968, she contracted the Asian flu and subsequently developed pneumonia. She died several days later at 66. Infamously, her last words were reported to have been a request for more codeine and bourbon. Now it's time to hear from you. Comment down below to share how you best remember Tallulah, or if you were surprised to learn about the radical lifestyle she openly chose to lead. And be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.